All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to all the very familiar faces. Welcome those from the Elwood community. Welcome from those who have joined from all over. It's truly a pleasure to have you with us this evening. And we're all very keen to listen to Ben's story and to Ben's message. But just by way of introduction, the flyer that we put out, the marketing that we had, the title was Hope, Courage, Strength, and Joy. All things that we're all seeking and looking for, especially at a time such as this, where it's a difficult time and a challenging time. And we're heading towards the Yamim Noraim, the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah. And we're looking for a pick-me-up. We're trying to find meaning and positive lessons any way we can, really, so we can really go into the Yamim Tovim to Rosh Hashanah with some good tips, some good lessons in our mind, some good messaging. So we thought this would be a wonderful idea. And I want to thank Ronnie Kawadlo, our chazan and our program director, who made the shidduch, who made the connection between Ben and this evening and our shul. So thank you, Ronnie, for the initiative and for making this happen. Before I ask Ben to take the floor, I think, Ben, as we put on the flyer, as he gave us the wording, is recovering. He's in recovery, on a journey. And this time of the year, we all talk about the word teshuvah, which is often translated as repentance. But I'd venture to say that teshuvah actually means recovery. It's about returning to our true self, coming back to who we are. I read somewhere, I think it was one of Ben's first interviews. I may have been with the Jewish News, Ben, that you said, those 15 years weren't really you. And now, once you've got through that, now it's you. And that's kind of what Teshuvah is all about, where you're able to find your inner self once again. There is a very powerful statement in the Talmud that says, in the place where a Baal Teshuvah stands, the righteous of the righteous cannot stand. And on a spiritual level, that means somebody who's been around the block, somebody who's encountered every struggle and every challenge, and yet finds a way back, finds a way to come back into the fold and to be the best they can be, is on a higher pedestal than somebody who's lived their entire life on the straight and narrow and as a righteous individual. Why? Because they never had those challenges. They never had those difficult moments. Who knows how they would have reacted? So tonight we're going to hear from somebody who went through difficult times. And yet here he is presenting to us, empowering us with a message of hope and strength. A true Baal Teshuvah. That's the essence of the word. So we hold you in very high regard, Ben, and we congratulate you on everything that you've achieved up until now, and we wish you continued hatzlacha as you go forward, as I'm sure we'll wish you at the end again. But thank you for joining us. Ben Morley, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Shmuel, and thank you, Ronnie, for allowing me and giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm really grateful, and I nearly got emotional when I see a lot of the names come up on the screen, and some that sort of took me back a long time. And I'm really excited to share my story. I do it quite a bit. I'm really grateful to be alive. Really, I'm really thankful, I guess, that my parents are in the crowd, and my beautiful wife and my daughter Ellie, and I can see a picture of my couple of babies. And my name's Ben Morley. I'm a recovering addict. I'm 6 years, 2 months and 2 weeks clean and serene. It's over 2,200 days. My story is such that, yes, I'm in recovery and I'm a recovering addict, and what I've gone through over the past 15 years while I was stuck in the cycle of addiction is really something that I nearly owe it to my community to be able to give back that which was so freely given to me. I'm a big advocate in addiction as a disease. Addiction wasn't a choice for me. I didn't grow up in school and put my hand up in the classroom and say I wanted to be a drug addict when I'm older. That wasn't something that I had planned. But I was really loved back to life by the Jewish community as a whole, by my parents, by my sister, by my brother-in-law, by my aunties and uncles, and I can see Julie somewhere in the crowd, and of course my best friends who were there during the rough times, during the tough times, but it really came down to my willingness and my motivation to want to get clean. I can also see Danny, who's in recovery, who I'm so proud of, who's been a small part of my journey. And a lot of people, a lot of families, everyone always knows someone who's struggling with addiction, whether it's drug and alcohol, whatever the addiction may be. We say in the rooms of NA that we're not bad people turning good. We're actually sick people getting well. And I was really sick for a long time. I grew up from a very, very loving environment. I had everything given to me. I had a privileged upbringing. I was really very grateful. But what happened, post year 12, I started to experiment with drugs and alcohol. Marijuana was my gateway drug, and eventually it led to more harder drugs. I wasn't really functioning. I was a loving, happy soul, but eventually, all of a sudden, about 6 years and 2 months ago, I was left on my own, isolating in my apartment, bereft of any hope or thought. I was just existing. I wasn't living. And I was enslaved to the addiction. I was stuck in the cycle of addiction. I couldn't break out of it. And the powerful nature that drugs and alcohol have is such that it actually sabotages the frontal cortex. So your ability to make conscious choices has actually been damaged. What I've actually achieved in my last 6 years and 2 months is inexplainable. It's unbelievable what's actually happened in my life to get me to this point right now. I want to open the floor in about 20 minutes for some questions. I know a lot of people, and especially a lot of the families and parents that I help with their loved one, don't really understand the process of recovery. People are a bit naive around addiction and what to do, how to detach with love, how to not enable your loved one, whether that's your husband, your uncle, your son, your daughter, your sister, your parents, whoever that may be. And the work that I do is so very important, especially in our community as a whole, because a lot of people like to sweep it under the rug. They don't want to be held accountable, but people really need to understand when I work with someone or change people's lives, I actually try to empower the loved one. It's actually okay to not be okay. In the last 6 years, I've been really proud of being a recovering addict. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'll voice it to the community. I'll have my own radio show. I'll share my story around Australia. I'll talk at schools. I'll do Zooms. I'll go around to families. I run interventions because I need people to understand that addiction is a disease and it's not a choice. It's something that once it gets a hold of you, people need to understand the process of going from active addiction through to recovery. In my early 30s, my parents sent me to rehabs over Australia. Nothing really worked. I didn't really want to do it for myself. I put my parents through hundreds of days and my aunties and uncles through sleepless nights. I'm so grateful that my parents are actually alive today because my amends to them is actually to stay in recovery and to stay grounded. And actually what you spoke about, Shmuel, it's really important that I actually understand that I'm still in recovery. Whether I'm 6 years, 6 days, 60 years clean, I'm always continuing to work on myself. The 12 steps that I work on a daily basis, it's not a religion or cult-like following. It's just a different way of viewing life. And it's a way of actually challenging yourself on a daily basis. I always say to my sister, Chloe, that I believe everyone should have a 12-step program in their life to actually continue to better themselves. But I have an allergic reaction to drugs and alcohol. I can't just go out with some friends on the weekend and have a few drinks or partake in using drugs because I have an allergic reaction. And once I start, I cannot stop. So I live a life of total sobriety. In my first year of recovery, on May the 31st, 2015, I received some tough love, which I needed for a long time because my parents didn't know what to do. When you're enslaved to a drug, particularly of methamphetamine or cocaine, a lot of our parents or the older generation don't know how to deal with that. I was angry. I was self-seeking. I was selfish. I was totally, the whole world evolved around me. And as soon as I stopped taking drugs or drinking for a couple of days, I got stuck into my own head again and I was isolated. The opposite of addiction is actually community. It's connection. It's other recovering addicts. It's communicating with other people that understand recovery. I don't sit every night and explain to my parents or my sister what recovery is or what the 12 steps are. I use that in the meetings of NA. So on May the 31st, 2015, my brother-in-law, Diego, who many know, broke into my apartment where I was about 43 kilos. I was olive. I was using. I was on the floor. I was suicidal. I didn't know how to exist. I didn't want to live, and I couldn't stop using. And he came and he practiced some tough love. He pretty much knocked some wind into me, chucked me in the back of my dad's car, and off I went to the Raymond Hayter Clinic in Geelong, which is a 12-step therapeutic private rehab, which was the first day of the rest of my life. I didn't know what to do. I was scared. I didn't know about recovery. I didn't know about Narcotics Anonymous. I didn't know that people could actually stop using drugs and alcohol on a daily basis, because my whole life evolved for over a decade of using drugs. And I spent hundreds of hours every week using the drugs, waiting for my dealer, running out of drugs, going to get, we call it the disease of more. You always want more. So all of a sudden, on May the 31st, 2015, I walked into a therapeutic community. There were 28 other addicts or in early recovery when I walked in, and I was welcomed with open arms. I was scared. I was concerned. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been in a type of therapeutic treatment before, but I just did the next right thing. I had drug dealers going to my dad's office. I had sheriffs going to the front door of my parents' house. I had people looking for me. I had people in the community calling up my parents, saying they've seen Ben Morley banging his head against traffic light poles on St Kilda Road. I was in a drug-induced psychosis for a long time. I thought I was functioning, but I wasn't. Up in Geelong, I spent 97 days. I did just over 3 months. I did meetings every day. I did check-ins every day. I wrote gratitude lists. I detoxed for the first 2 weeks. And I was loved back to life. You take away all the externals. There were no phones. There was no contact with the outside world. There were no TVs. There was nothing that could take me away from actually practicing me, sitting with myself. After 97 days, I then moved on and I stayed in treatment for the next 6 months. I lived in a transitional housing program in Moonee Ponds with 16 other recovering addicts. I worked through the 12 steps. I did about 500 NA meetings in my first year of recovery. My first 12 months of recovery, I did it like my life depended on it, because I didn't want to have to do this again. I didn't want to go back. And I didn't know if I actually had the strength to try to get clean again. And I was so grateful that my parents were willing to help me through that and to finance my time for those first 10 months. And I'm forever grateful for them for that. After 10 months, I saw many friends go through early recovery. A lot of my friends relapsed. A lot of my recovery brothers that I loved, that I spent 10 months in treatment with, some of them OD'd and died. Some of them relapsed and I've never seen again. Some went to jails, some went to institutions, some went to psych wards, because it's jails, institutions, or death. That's where our addiction ends up taking us. It's a progressive disease. It doesn't stop. So for those first 12 months, I wrote my gratitude list. I did my daily walks. I went to my meetings. I got coached. I got a service position. I got a sponsor. I got a home group. I just did the opposite of what my brain wanted to do. But there was something deep inside me that was really excited to get clean. I didn't know about recovery and about clean time tags and getting 30, 60, 90 days clean and people standing up and clapping you and sharing at meetings. I nearly had resentments against NA because from 20 to 30 years old, there were meetings around the corner. I didn't know about recovery coaching. I didn't know that people all over the world, both in NA, AA, could actually get clean one day at a time. And that's actually what it was. It was one day at a time. My opinion, my thoughts didn't matter. I just had to do the next right thing and follow in the footsteps of the people in front of me. But there was something inside me that was burning. I had this ambition, this drive, this ongoing want to actually celebrate my clean time to the community, because I was the black sheep. I was ostracized. I watched my friends get married, get engaged, had children. All of a sudden, I was 35 years old, living in a single apartment, conning my parents and manipulating them to help me pay my rent. And I was just sitting there using drugs on my own, isolated. This is coming from someone who taught drama at Yavna for nearly a decade, surrounded by kids and people. All of a sudden, after about 10 months clean, would you believe it, I went and moved home for a couple of months. And I was just so grateful to be alive while my parents were alive, because I still realized the trauma that I actually went through and the ability that I actually did just to get clean, because time takes time. I didn't want to fast track my recovery. All of a sudden, at about 9 months clean, I wanted to study. So I did my AOD and mental health course. I ended up running my own private rehabilitation centre with a couple of colleagues. I then, after 2 years of running a treatment centre, I branched out on my own and created my own business called Drug Ed. I did my recovery coaching course. I did my addiction therapy diploma. I wanted to be the best at what I was doing, because if I'm not using drugs and alcohol, I want to do the complete opposite. I want to be a master in what I'm doing. I want to be the best that I can be and the best version of myself. I was so grateful that for a long time, my sister, my parents, my aunties, uncles, my friends, I put them through trauma. I created all of this drama that I didn't even realize what was actually going on. I met my beautiful wife, Paula Morley, at 2 years clean. I was running a private rehab. She came in for a job. I was running a check-in. And about 3 months later, I proposed to her. I fell in love. And all of a sudden, we got married. And this is, it was really emotional for me. My wedding was like my rebirth. I've never met so many people that had played such a part in my life, and celebrating my wedding at that moment with so many people surrounded by love and support was one of the most amazing days of my life. And since then, I've had a beautiful girl, Ellie Morley, whose birthday was yesterday. And I've got 2 beautiful babies who I say my 3 kids are my greatest gifts of my recovery. I've created these humans and this life for myself because I'm clean. And that's all I had to do. One day became 30 days, became 2,220 days. I just had to do the next right thing. So yes, there are days when I'm down. There are days when I struggle. There are days when sometimes using might sound like a good idea, but I have a relapse prevention plan. I have a list of things that I'll do before I pick up my first drug. I have friends, I have colleagues, I have coaches, I have sponsors, I have people in the rooms that actually support my recovery, that I can turn to, that I can speak to, because it is a community, and it is really important that people actually understand the process of reaching out to one another. Now I actually run Drug Ed, so I work with family members. I'm an interventionist, so I refer a lot of clients to rehabilitation centres. I work in conjunction with Carlo Lamacancina, who actually supported me in my early recovery. He runs a place called Harmony House, which is a therapeutic transition boutique house where we get the most amazing results. People don't call my family now saying they've seen Ben Morley bang his head against a traffic light pole on St Kilda Road. They actually call my family wanting to speak to Ben Morley. And that's really humbling, because I need to actually give back that which was given to me. And the most important thing that I work through, and probably my most challenging, are working with the families and the parents. The loved ones, the addicts, the people that are trying to get clean, I form an instant bond with. I understand where they're coming from. And if they just say, teach me, help me, show me a new way to live, Ben, I'll take them on board and I'll help them get clean and I'll change their lives. But it's the family members, it's the parents of the addicts, it's the parents of the loved ones that actually need the hard support. They need to understand how to detach with love, how to stop enabling their loved ones, because it's an emotional connection which they find it really hard to let go. And I've been at many interventions when I've had uncles, aunties, people standing over me saying, we don't understand, we don't know what to do. How can you say kick him out of their house? How can you say change the locks on the door? How can you make us not keep on funding their habit or their addiction? Where are they going to live? And I say, well, they're going to be dead, because unfortunately that's the nature of the disease of addiction. That's where it lies. So many times the parents and the family members play the most important role. They're the key to actually helping their loved ones get clean. And I guess ironically, I've had so many of my close friends over the last, particularly since lockdown, call me and say, Ben, my friend's in trouble, my brother's, what do? We don't know what to do. So I say, let's stop stepping on eggshells. Let's call it how it is. So I don't like to say when I run and facilitate interventions, I like to call it more of a gathering of love, because the addicts or the loved ones who are struggling, they go through enough guilt and shame. They go through enough moments in themselves where their mind starts to play tricks on them. And usually there's about 80% going on for that addict or the loved one that family members don't understand and they're not privy to, and they will never know. So the most important thing is people understanding, if it's your loved one or if it's yourself or someone that needs help, you need to reach out, because all of a sudden we'll be sitting here in 5 years, 10 years, and actually nothing much has changed with that person. Recovery is possible. Recovery is about progression, not perfection. We don't have to perfect our recovery and perfect exactly what we need to do. Sometimes it's just about putting our hand up and saying, I'll just do the next right thing. Yeah. For step one, particularly, it's actually that we admitted that we're powerless over our addiction and that our lives have become unmanageable. Now, for a lot of people, or a lot of the older thinkers or the older generation, putting your hand up and saying that I need help, I'm vulnerable, I'm powerless, people actually can see as a negative or a victim. It's actually the opposite. And I guess particularly in this day and age, it's really important for people to actually put their hand up and say, you know what, I need help. So I really implore people, because I've had so many, I've just been inundated, especially during lockdown over the last 18 months, especially with a lot of the rules put up. It's been a big struggle for many family members to actually facilitate or help their loved one who's struggling with addiction or alcohol. Many of the NA and AA meetings all over the world are actually in lockdown, are shut down. So fortunately or unfortunately, many of the meetings that I do at the moment, or that we do in the community, are via Zoom, which actually stops or halts on that human connection, which a lot of addicts in early recovery really need. Particularly being a recovering addict, I love going to schools. I love going to other places and talking in open forums, because a lot of people don't understand and they don't qualify addiction as a disease. So if, as an example, if I had cancer or diabetes or any other life-threatening illness, I need to go to hospital. I need to get chemo. I need to get well. I need to go through the process of healing. It's exactly the same with drug or alcohol addiction. If I have an addiction, I need to go to treatment. I need to get coaching. I need to go through therapy. I need to go through a therapeutic community and then come out the other side with an aftercare program in order to get my life back, in order to get recovery back. What I've achieved in 2,000 days, I couldn't even write down the amount of gratitude that I have on a daily basis. And it's really an attitude of gratitude. That's where it leaves us. That's where it lies. That's where it comes from the heart. Because before this, no one would have recognized me. I didn't want to know anyone. If you didn't have drugs or alcohol, if you didn't have money, if you weren't of service to me, I would wipe my hands. And a lot of people I put through, many struggling times, and I'm so grateful that I've actually earned the trust and the respect back. But it's not going to work if I did it for other people, because I spent years trying to get clean for other people and it didn't work. I actually had to do it for myself. I actually had to hit a rock bottom in order to realize what I actually wanted. Because when we use or when we're taking drugs, we're looking to forget. We're trying to focus on all these externals in order to feel good. So all of a sudden, when you come into treatment, you come into coaching and you put your hand up and you say, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Unfortunately, the nature of the disease of addiction is most people don't get clean. Most people don't get a year or two clean. But sometimes, and in that occasion where someone actually wants it and has a willing and a desire and a motivation to want to work on themselves, recovery is possible and miracles actually happen. And I've been on this pink cloud for just over 6 years. I've had some struggling times, I have some struggling moments, but in those moments, I don't pick up. In February of this year, my beautiful 2-year-old Kaya had an accident in the kitchen. She had burns nearly 13% of her body. It was a big drama in our house. It was a big traumatic event, and I didn't need to pick up. I stayed in recovery and I stayed grounded and I stayed present in order to be there for my daughter. And she's gone through the healing process and we all have together. But I needed to be the best father and the best dad and the best husband that I could during those moments. And I woke up for many weeks and I had uncontrollable tears of what I actually have gone through that process with her, but I needed to be strong. And the Ben of 10, 12, 15 years ago wouldn't have been able to deal with that. So the tools that I've learned along the way, my first year of recovery was the most important of my journey. And I say to many families when I go over there and I take on their loved one and help them through early recovery, their number one job in recovery is to be in recovery. It's not to go and work part-time. It's not to go and make money. It's not to go and do casual work or make sure that their apartment's still there. It's actually to do recovery properly. Because if I did 1 year of proper hardcore recovery for my first 12 months, I'll have the rest of my life back. You know, so it's really important. I want to open the floor to a lot of questions. I know there's some people that may have something in their mind that they want to ask. Remember, there's no wrong questions. But like I say, I really need to stay grounded. I'm really proud of being a recovery coach and interventionist. I'm really grateful that I'm alive. But my most important, I guess, role to play is actually educating not only our community, but those beyond, educating people around addiction as a disease model. That it's not a choice, and people can often get frustrated and angry and resentful with their brother. Why can't they just stop? Why can't my husband just stop drinking? Why can't my son just stop using drugs? How dare he? That's not fair. Why can't he realize? But we really need to be educated and understand that a lot of the times when they're stuck back in that cycle, it's not their fault. They can't stop doing it on a daily basis. The disease has actually started to play on the neurotransmitters and neuropathways and taken over the frontal cortex of the brain. So what I've achieved over the last 18 months in terms of helping people get clean is unimaginable. I've seen people change. I've seen families healed. I've seen people brought back to life, exactly as I was. So that's the most important role that I play, and I'm just so grateful that I'm able to, I guess, share that message of recovery. So thanks very much.
Wow. Thank you so very much, Ben. That was pretty incredible. I don't know if you can see, but a lot of people are clapping. We have over 150 people with us this evening, which is lovely, on over 80 devices. Incredible. Before we go to questions, just thank you. First of all, thank you for opening our eyes and educating us on addiction and on recovery, and a real insight from the inside of what's involved and what it feels like, and the fact that you've emphasized that it's a disease, not a choice, is incredible. But I think as well, and perhaps you can address this further, we're not all on the same journey, right? We're not all recovering from drug addiction. However, there is so much to be learned from the messages that you shared this evening with us on whatever journey we're traveling. I mean, I hear you loud and clear when you talk about the power of community and the support. I think you mentioned the word that you were loved back to life. And I think that's not just from drug recovery, but that can be the power of love to our family members, to our community, especially in a time such as this, is just so powerful. Challenging yourself every day on a daily basis to put in the effort, to put one foot in front of the other, to do the right thing is a very, very powerful message, to be the best version of ourselves. And perhaps your most powerful line, Ben, is that recovery is progression and not about perfection. I actually love that, because again, it's not only about recovering from addiction, it's this whole process of becoming a better human being. It's about progress over perfection. And I thank you for some of those incredible personal sentiments, journey, tips, and lessons that you've inspired us with tonight. Definitely an element of hope and courage, strength, and resilience, and a willingness to live and to celebrate life. So I thank you for that, Ben. May I wish a happy birthday to Ellie as well. Happy birthday for yesterday. And I'm going to open the floor to questions. Pop them in the chat, please. If anybody has a question, I'll read them out. Well, we've got some statements, lots of thanks. Feel free to go into the chat and look at the thanks there. If anybody has a question, can you pop it in the chat?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Shmuel. So I'll just add that, I'm not responsible for my addiction, but I am now responsible for my recovery. So it's really important, if you have a loved one who's struggling, or you know someone that's battling an addiction, it's time to they need to be held accountable, but not from a family member, from someone who actually understands what they're going through. So I'm not their brother, I'm not their father, I'm not their best friend. As a recovery coach and someone grabbing them and empowering them into recovery, the tough love and the hard support is something that's really important, because by just sort of fluffing them up and telling them what they want to hear and skirting around the edges isn't going to help your loved one get clean. Yep.
Brilliant. Okay, Mandy, would you like to read out the questions, please? That's our Vice President from Elwood Shul.
Oh. Hello. Yes, we have a question that says, wants to ask you, Ben, did you ever try to recover before And why did that particular program work for you?
Yes, for a couple of years I did try to recover as such, but I never actually experienced a 12-step therapeutic community. What do I mean by therapeutic? I mean, there's many type of Band-Aid treatment places around Melbourne and Australia, which I believe, I guess any type of treatment for anybody can be possible. But going into some type of clinic or 2-week detox or 6 weeks somewhere, that's not recovery. That's not treatment. It's actually 90 days is really the time it takes to actually change the way you think and feel. And the way that I got clean properly was surrounded by a therapeutic community. And I'm sure Danny somewhere in here can attest to that. By being in a therapeutic community and being part of a community of recovering addicts actually involves people actually understanding your story and relating back to them. Because an addict on their own is an addict in trouble. So going somewhere for 2 weeks and then coming out the other side and saying, I'm cured, I'm healed. I've seen so many people that I've helped, people that I've gone through early recovery with, sort of dip their foot into recovery or do maybe a meeting a week, or sometimes write some gratitude lists with a sponsor or with a recovery coach, and then go back to work straight away. Oh yeah, I'll go into treatment for 6 weeks. Thanks, Mum. Thanks, Dad. And I'll come back out, but I really need to go back to work because I really need to make lots of money and my boss really wants me to be there. That's not going to work. I remember after 3 months, instead of going in transition, I was really resentful that I heard my parents talking to the owner of the rehab, talking about Ben going into a transition house. I just wanted to go back out there and work and make money. But I thank my higher power that I continued to stay in treatment. I continued to stay teachable. And even now, some of the powerful messages in the rooms of NA and in recovery world is, I still don't know everything. And I just wanted to really quickly add to that. My wife, Paula, actually practices total sobriety. She's, I think, 4 years clean since I met her. She's not an addict, but she supports me on my journey and maintains total sobriety. So I think that's a really special person.
That's incredible.
Ben, we have another question.
Sure.
It says, hi, Ben, thanks so much for sharing your story. I have a question. How do you engage family members in conversation about addiction when they don't want to admit that there is one?
Well, when someone calls me or someone's called me up, and particularly, a parent or a loved one who needs their loved one to actually get help, I explain to them the process of what needs to happen. Usually that starts with a conversation, and my role, or what I do, which I find is the best way or really works, is to get them on side and actually empower them and to talk one-on-one. So while I'm working with the family, the most important thing is working separately but independently with the loved one without anyone else around. Because the parents and the family members need to take a step back. Their loved one needs to go through the process of healing and go through recovery and detox without the white noise, without the family members around, because a lot of the time the family members are resentful and angry and frustrated. So I will give my support and my professional advice, what the parents or whoever has called me needs to do. And that is organise a place where we meet as an intervention type setup and with the loved one, and explain to them the process of what's going to happen. And if the loved one who is using or drinking or in active addiction, we no longer leave the ball in their court, because they like to play a lot of the games and create the dramas. Oh, I'll come later on. I don't want to do this. I'm not ready to stop. So everyone needs to take on my support and detach with love. We love you. We care about you. We're here for you. But if you're not willing to engage in recovery and help yourself and get clean, we can no longer interact or engage with you. We're here for you. We love you. And when you're ready to process what's happening and give us a call and say, I'm ready to get help, then we're here with open arms.
Thanks, Ben. We have another question. Were you put on methadone during rehab? Did it work, or did you get hooked on the methadone?
No, I wasn't. I was put on a diazepam reduction for the first 14 days, which is Valium, which was a slow detox. A lot of people, when they first come into treatment or Harmony House or rehab, we're off the charts. We can't sit with ourselves. Our brain is constantly going. I just brought someone today into Harmony House who was coming off a meth addiction. A lot of people don't really want to go on a diazepam reduction, but we need to slow them down. They need to calm down. They need to eat, sleep, repeat. They need to just take a load off, because we call it, it's like coming in from the front line. It's like coming out of war from the front line of addiction. Everything is so hectic. I remember walking the streets of Armidale in the middle of the night looking for places to plug my phone into. I remember going through sleepless nights, walking the streets, wondering where I was going to sleep. I remember carrying dog biscuits in my pocket so I could break into my parents' house so the dog wouldn't bark and wake up, you know, to steal or whatever I could find. We're not ourselves when we're in active addiction. So like I said, the gift of recovery is see people actually transform and change, because people can change. So back to the question, it's really important to go through that detox process when they first enter treatment. And what I believe is the best way of going through early recovery and detoxes and treatment is more one-on-one, not sort of getting lost in the crowd with these short-term Band-Aid treatment centre where people go in and come out and it kind of ends up being like a revolving door. Oh, I'll go back to the clinic next year. Oh, I didn't get clean, I've relapsed. Yeah, mum and dad, I'll go back to that treatment centre. That doesn't work, in my opinion.
Thanks, Ben. What made you start using? Was it recreational, a lack of purpose, boredom, something missing in your life? Sorry, it's a bit of a long question. Curious to hear your thoughts or reflections. Are there typical signs to look for in someone who might be leading down that path, especially in today's times?
Sure. So to answer the question backwards, when someone's irritable, when someone's impatient, where they're standoffish, where they're angry, you know, and I usually educate people around the cycle of addiction and what signs to look for, where they struggle to sit with themselves, when you can't really have an ongoing conversation, where they don't own their part to play. And it's funny, a lot of the professors around the world in terms of talking about addiction, talk about trauma and people going through early trauma and the reason they come from broken families or jails and prisons where they really had nothing and they weren't loved, and then they go into active addiction. And it's funny, I see a lot of people, or unfortunately, you know, even walking down Chapel Street who are in active addiction or in drug-induced psychosis. A lot of them have parents or come from, you know, very well-off families who grew up and they went to school and they had everything given to them, and they ended up going down the garden path of addiction, unfortunately. In other situations like mine, I had a very loving, happy childhood. I started off experimenting with marijuana, which was my gateway drug. I guess it was the fun thing to do. I enjoyed it. I got high. It was something that I did on the weekends with my friends. And eventually, after going overseas for a year after Mount Scopus, year 12, I started to experiment with more harder drugs. I came back here. I went to university. And all of a sudden, slowly, from using drugs and drinking recreationally and going to bush parties and the Rainbow Serpents in India and Thailand and the thing that we do, eventually I started using on my own. And I like I guess the serotonin dopamine effect that it gave me, not so much in order to feel good, but it was really an escape. And it was actually something to do in my spare time or when I was alone. So I went from doing it recreationally with my friends to all of a sudden just using on my own every day, scared to actually walk out of my front door and face the world. And I saw someone's question on here about I had speeding fines, parking fines. I didn't answer my doorbell for about a year. I didn't look in my mailbox for about 3 years. I went in front of courts many times with over $100,000 worth of parking and speeding fines with my dad who assisted me during those tough times. And I went up in front of the judge and I did a whole power share to him about being in early recovery. And he was amazed, because when someone tells their story about going through treatment and getting well, there's something that happens. We start to feel good. We start to look good. We start to illuminate the path for other people, and people are drawn to us. So yeah, I mean, even to this day, I still have, every month I pay off my fines like I was doing 6 years and 2 months ago, because that's something that I need to own. That's part of my amends.
Thanks, Ben. And how have you found all of these lockdowns? Most people that you speak to are doing it tough in general, but how have you taken on the hardship of lockdowns?
You know what? I guess ironically, having 3 kids and 2 babies and a dog and a lizard, the Zoom meetings have actually, I really enjoy them. I've taken to them. I like sort of the interaction of being able to do it from home rather than actually going out. But at the same time, there are many thousands and millions of people worldwide who struggle doing online Zoom sessions, whether it's interventions. I mean, as an essential service, I do still allowed to go to other people's houses and run interventions and recovery coach and as an essential service. But particularly during lockdown, as I mentioned earlier, you miss that face-to-face connection that a lot of recovering addicts or alcoholics, I'll say, really need. And I talk about addicts and alcoholics in the same sentence because in my first year of recovery, where I did about 500 meetings, I went to AA meetings as well as NA. And alcohol wasn't my drug. Drinking wasn't a big thing for me, but we say in the rooms in terms of total sobriety, even in my wedding and the l'chayims, I never picked up even a drink because why do I need to put something in my body in order to change the way I think and feel? And I know I'll digress a little bit, but I know there are a lot of people out there who question whether they're an addict or whether they're an alcoholic. And I've had some of my really close friends over the last 6 months call me and confide in me, asking for help. And if you're looking forward to doing something, if you're working Monday to Friday, looking for that that outlook or looking to forget from that Friday or wanting to drink every Friday or go and use drugs every second weekend, if you're constantly living the day-to-day in order to get to that one night a week or that one night a fortnight, then there's something going on because you're actually not present and you're actually not living in the day-to-day.
Sorry, there's just so many questions. Have you found that there's a big problem within the Jewish community in particular?
Huge, a huge problem. I've never been inundated in the last 18 months. Even by telling my story and creating this pathway for people to actually feel comfortable in opening up to me. Unfortunately, not in just the Jewish community, but beyond, people are afraid to actually call out someone who they know might be struggling. People's egos stop them from actually getting clean. People like to forget. People like to sweep it under the rug. People are scared to confront their loved one. But what you're actually doing is prolonging the inevitable. And by actually calling someone out that you love, whether it's your son, your daughter, your brother, your parents. I had a beautiful man come into treatment over the last week, an alcoholic with daughters, and all of a sudden putting his hand up because sometimes some of the older, fathers or older people who are trying to get clean, it's actually inspirational and courageous. And I'm really excited to take people through that journey of actually humbling and saying, you know what, I'm 40, I'm 50, I'm 60. I need to do this properly once in order to get my life back. So it's really important that people understand you're actually saving your loved one's life by calling them out. I had many interventions. I had 11 of my best friends, probably about 3 or 4 times, romp into my apartment where I was living and using, sit me down and saying, Ben, we're worried, we're concerned, you have a problem. And I used to point my finger and say, hang on, but you had Coke with me last night. You drank with me last weekend. I've been using with you for a long time. And I started to point the finger because I didn't want to take the ownership. I didn't want to admit what I was doing. And I didn't actually want to stop using.
What does the first year of rehab look like? What do you do in rehab on a day-to-day basis?
So the first year of treatment, I would say, primarily, is actually live and breathe recovery. So it's taking, and I always think that what an amazing opportunity that a lot of humans actually don't have, that millions of people don't have around the world, to be able to create a path and actually go into recovery. Unfortunately, in the public sector, it can be a 3, 6, 9 month waiting list to go into a public treatment centre or a clinic. So the opportunity to go into a private treatment centre or boutique type setup in a transition house or have recovery coaching is such that it's the one opportunity where a lot of people would do anything to take 3 months, 9 months, 1 year out of their daily lives and be put somewhere where they're actually loved, where they're supported, where they don't have to work and they don't have to worry about outside responsibilities and actually focus on themselves. It's actually about being able to sit with yourself and being willing to say, you know what, I'm going to dedicate the next 9 months to getting my life back, which is really important. So the first year of recovery looks like eat, sleeping, repeating, waking up, going for a morning walk, writing a journal, sitting at a daily check-in. A check-in is sitting with yourself and other recovering addicts, whether it's 4 or 24, and talking about your last 24 hours. What emotions, what feelings, what thoughts have you gone through over the last 24 hours? And being given support from a clean space. It's then about eating, sleeping, repeating, going to meetings, going for walks, communicating, going to groups, learning about the process of the 12 steps. And I just wanted to add quickly, the 12 steps, a lot of people are a bit naive or judgmental around a 12-step program as some type of Scientology cult or whatever that looks like. Everyone's allowed their own opinion or advice. There's no I in the steps. It's all we. We admitted, we came, we made a decision, we humbly asked. It's a we program, the process of recovery. The 12 steps are just a different way of viewing the world and practicing this self-actualization. Yeah. Recovery is a simple program for complicated people, we say. So it's just about just doing the next right thing. It's reading the just for today or the thought of the day. It's writing a relapse prevention plan. It's gaining insight into meetings. You know, my first 12 months, I did over 500 NA and AA meetings like my life depends on it. Now, over 6 years later, NA is not my life, but it gave me back my life. I go to meetings to refuel. I go to meetings so I can be the best version of myself I can be. Sometimes I can't be bothered. I'd rather watch Survivor with my wife in my bed on my couch. But I go to actually give back. I go because someone may be at their first meeting, scared, vulnerable, not knowing what to do. And all of a sudden, me sharing at a meeting about my last 6 years actually gets someone else to think, oh, wow, recovery is actually possible. So that first 5 years of recovery was really important. Now I do my 2 meetings a week, my regular Monday night St Kilda men's group, and I'll sometimes do a meeting or 2 in there as well. But I have to keep my recovery going. And there'll be phases over the last 6 years where you ebb and flow. But as long as I stay grounded and stay in recovery, I didn't get clean to lead a mediocre life. I didn't get clean to just go into recovery and then go back to living again. I got clean to actually live a life beyond my wildest dreams. Sounds a bit cliche, doesn't it? But it's actually true.
Sounds awesome. What do you say to the youth who say that smoking marijuana on a casual basis is not harmful?
Well, unfortunately, if you ask me if my 16-year-old son, if I'd prefer him being addicted to heroin or marijuana, I would actually choose heroin, because marijuana is actually the main source of actually people not being able to stop. I couldn't go to bed without marijuana for about 12 years. Couldn't do it. So unfortunately, even with the vaping or the other drugs, I had I've had a number of parents call me who are year 11, year 12 boys over the last 2 years who struggle. Parents, single mothers don't know what to do. They don't know how to respond. They're scared. They get anxious. They get worried, especially with teenage boys who are maybe on some other medication or are going out on the weekend or smoking bogs or taking marijuana or using drugs. And all of a sudden, they may only do it once a weekend, but they come back and have to live at home for those next 3 or 4 nights where they're actually coming out a bit sideways, where they actually can't deal with the process or the maturity of not taking marijuana or detoxing for that 4 or 5 day period. So all of a sudden, after 2 or 3 days, they become impossible. They become impatient. They become intolerant. They become moody. And all of a sudden, they actually, the most powerful thing I've found, that they can actually have a mentor or a recovery coach or someone they can actually relate to outside of their family type setup. But I'll tell you, I've gone to many schools over the last few years and done many talks to thousands of kids, and I've never seen such an amazing response. And unfortunately, there are a few private schools that don't want a recovering addict to tell their story and come in and be really raw and emotional and explain what's actually happening in our community. And on the other side, I've been privileged to go into other private schools, Jewish schools, and tell my story and been loved. And I've had queues of students and parents line up after my talk during a lunchtime, lining up, asking questions, wanting to know more. So I've spoken to a few parents on many boards who are trying to initiate and instill that not just drug education and awareness in schools, but it's so important to not just have some practitioner or teacher to come in and talk about drug addiction, but for actually someone in recovery to come and tell their personal story and get real about what's happening to our youth of today.
There's a question, Ben, you had the chance to live away for months. What about all of the drug addicts that don't have opportunities to live away from their families? How do you help people in this situation?
Well, if they're living with their families and they're continuing to use drugs or alcohol, the family members need to take a hardline approach and actually set some healthy boundaries in play. And what are your non-negotiables? So I say this a lot to family members or parents of the loved one. What are your non-negotiables? What are you willing to not negotiate around what you accept? What are you willing to accept? Are you willing to stay embroiled in the drama? Are you willing to live with someone who's engaged in the cycle of addiction? Because this is a family disease. Our addiction affects everyone else around us. And what I probably wasn't realized or privy to is how much my addiction affected my family, my uncles, my aunties, my best friends. During all those years that I was isolating and using on my own, how many thousands of sleepless nights I would have put my family through. So going through recovery and all of a sudden coming out the other side, my first few months was just all about gratitude. I was just so grateful about that I still had a loving support system around me.
Speaking of your family, how did the Jewish community treat your family?
Oh, amazing. I've never had so many people, even to this day, call my parents and thank them and be there for them. And it's funny, I've never, especially with my mum, has so many girlfriends. I've never seen someone so loved by so many people over the years in terms of what I've put her through. And really, it's about giving back. And it's about the community getting behind each other and actually calling it out. Because for many years, my mum, my dad, they didn't know what to do. That they were scared. They were worried. They were concerned. And I was really lucky that I had Julie and Joey and Gina and Ian, my aunties and uncles, actually challenge my dad along with my best friend Noah to actually tell my dad what needs to happen and actually explain to them the process of what Ben needs to do. And Chloe and Diego call out my parents who were a bit naive. I think the worst thing my dad ever did, Dad had a couple of beers after Wesley at university. I think that was the extent of his drug and alcohol use, have a couple of beers. So they didn't really know about methamphetamine and hard drugs and stimulants and what they do to the brain and what they do to the mind. And particularly remember, coming off these hard drugs is something that the brain needs to heal. The brain needs to go through the process of healing. And luckily enough, our brain does restore itself to normal factory settings after about 9 months plus of clean time.
Final question, Mandy?
Yeah, I'm just going to go to this last question. How and when did you know that you wanted to be involved in helping people into recovery?
I'll tell you what, I reckon it was after 11 days of being in rehab. I was crazy. I was so full on. I wanted to run the check-ins. I wanted to start supporting people. I begged my dad, I think it was about 6 months clean, please, I had the opportunity. I was sharing in an NA meeting in Paran off Chapel Street. And one particular, Carlo, very well-known recovering addict who was a decade clean, came up to me after I shared and said, I need you. I want you to be part of this process with me. I want you to be my partner in a private rehab, which I want you to help run. And I was so excited because all of a sudden, after a couple of weeks of being in treatment, I knew this was my purpose. I knew that if I'm not going to take drugs and alcohol, I wanted to be held accountable. And I guess maybe it was that the struggling actor in me who for years and years, through many countless agents and auditions, who always played the victim, who always went and used drugs and alcohol after every failed audition, who ended up doing kids' birthday parties, dressed up as a clown, climbing strangers' fences. All of a sudden, I knew there was a new purpose for me now. And there was a new reason why I could actually make a difference in our community. Because for many years, I was a victim. I was looking on the outside, looking in, watching everyone change their lives, feeling guilt and shame of wanting to actually make my parents proud. And all of a sudden, I found my purpose.
Thank you, Ben. Just before we conclude, is there an email address or a number that people can still reach out to you if they have further questions or just learn more?
Sure, of course. I'll put it up now on the chat so people are welcome to see that. And remember, I really just want to emphasize that it's really important that you can help your loved one if they're struggling. And if they hate you and despise you and resent you, a couple of weeks or months after that, when they're in recovery, you'll be the people that actually save their lives.
Amazing. So if you wanted more information, Ben's popping it into the chat. You could copy and paste. Ben, thank you on behalf of our President, Mark Curran, who's with us this evening, Vice President Mandy Curran, who's with us this evening, our Program Director, Ronnie, the rest of the board members who are with us, and all the congregation and everybody here tonight. Ben, thank you. Thank you for giving us a beautiful face of humanity. Thank you for showing us how important compassion and love and support and everything that goes along with it. Life. Thank you for showing us life. I wish you and I wish us all a Shana Tova Metuka, a good year and a healthy year in every which way, on every journey that we're traveling, and we should only know of good things. Ben, you're a champ, you're an inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining.
Andy, you're welcome to stop the recording.